Now to much more serious news, well, it's certainly very serious news, and that's in Russia, because a national day of mourning is taking place following that absolutely brutal and devastating massacre at a concert hall near Moscow on Friday, and it killed, we know now, at least 133 people.
Well, despite the Islamist group Islamic State claiming responsibility for the attack, President Putin has suggested the attackers were helped by Ukraine. Here's what he said overnight.
All the executors, planners and those who ordered this crime will be rightfully and inevitably punished, whoever they are and whoever directed them. Let me repeat, we will identify and punish everyone who stood behind the terrorists who prepared this attack against Russia, against our people.
Well, with us in the studio now, defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. This is fascinating, isn't it? Because Islamic State, as it were, have claimed responsibility.
Quite quickly.
But President Putin clearly thinks, or is seizing the opportunity to blame Ukraine as well.
There are two strands, in this story now. One is the massacre itself, which was terrible, and the number seems to have gone up to 143 now, with hundreds injured, unspecified numbers. They're probably in a number of hospitals. But the other is the false flag argument. This is a political story now which is gathering potency, and it is very important. ISK, as it's called, the Islamic State Khorasan, the parts of Afghanistan whence it comes, where it is fighting the Taliban, would you believe it, has form. It's done a lot of things. But also Putin, Russia, has form with false flag arguments. And a lot of the Russians in exile, the experts have been going through quite a lot of their comments just this morning, again, are pointing to the precedents of false flag arguments. And there was one spectacular one in 1999 where apartment blocks were blown up in Moscow as Putin himself was moving, follow me, from being prime minister to president for the first time. He's just been re-elected for the fifth time to the headship of government and state. He did briefly become prime minister in between. At that time, he launched the second terrible Chechen war. So this was fingered very clearly. It's very interesting for us here in Britain and us here in London by Alexander Litvinenko, who was then killed 3 years later. So this, what I'm saying is that Putin's argument, which you illustrated here, shows the psychological campaign he is going through now. What he's saying to people in Russia, in Moscow in particular, is, I'm still in charge, I'm a big boss, the enemies are all around, my war is right. And it's not the war where he is in trouble, by the way, on the Caucasus borders of Russia with Islamic fundamentalists who have attacked in Russia and in Iran, the new Russian ally. And you can see how complex it's going. I'm afraid in the psychological war, we're just at the beginning of it.
Is this a sense, then, that it's better from his perspective to say, we effectively have one enemy, this is being either driven, orchestrated or supported by Ukraine, rather than saying, I'm being attacked from multiple sides?
He wouldn't say that. You're absolutely right, Stephen. What he is saying, your security is safe in my hands, except... why didn't the GRU, the FSB, the Secret Services react sooner? Even the emergency services took nearly 2 hours to arrive in strength at the scene. But his message is, I'm the boss, I'm going to make it work for me. I was just watching his body language. It was rather different from the pantomime coup, you may remember, of Prigozhin and the Wagner group, where he did look, for a moment, genuinely panicked. He didn't look panicked, and one looked as if the old pantomime czar, I'm the boss man, I'm the monarch in charge. This was being played at this time, declaration of national mourning, and this will be milked. It goes out on state TV. Most will believe it.
Yes. Yeah. But what I don't quite get is that if you hypothesise that it could have been a false flag operation, who instigated it? Whose fault was it? Islamic State? Islamic State encouraged by the Russian government? Would Ukraine have had anything to do with it? Didn't even Western intelligence warn them that something was about to happen?
I don't want to be Weasley, but I do have a thoroughly Weasley mind, because that's why I look into these things. I think it was a bit of both. I think they knew that something was going on. Let's use it, possibly. I'm not saying that's for sure, because you used absolutely the right word. I don't say on GB News le mot juste, but the right word. This is hypothesizing. Yes, something was going on, because it's so peculiar. The Americans knew that ISIL, Islamic State, was up to something. And by the way, they did a big bomb in Iran, you may remember, at the beginning of the year in January, which took everybody by surprise. That came out on the 9th of March. Only 3 days ago, that was responded to by Moscow, by the Kremlin, by Putin land, in saying, oh, that was panic and subversion being caused by the Americans. So what really was going on? I'm afraid to say it's not time will tell. We may never really know, unless there is a Litvinenko who says this is how the wheels of deliberation. But it is very dark, a lot of this, very Machiavellian. Can I point out a thing that nobody has pointed out in this? No suicide attackers.
No, they've caught them all and they're alive.
And part of the MO, the way they operated with, as we all know, the extreme ends of IS, is that it's absolutely, this is how I go to paradise, that I become a martyr and I do that. So there is something, I think we're right in concluding that, very strange about this, and we're not getting the full picture.
OK.
I mean, it was
Robert, for now.
Unbelievably brutal incident. And for the gunmen to all have survived, apparently, is extraordinary and very unusual.